with Callan. Callan always joins us just about every podcast. Afternoon, gents. Lee, thoughts on the Ducks shifting from Bally to Victory Plus alongside the Dallas Stars? I'm eager to see how this works, but thankfully it'll be free of charge in the San Diego market.
Well, it'll be free up in L.A. and Orange County. They were all victimized. I think there's 12 NHL teams that were hurt by the Diamond Sports bankruptcy and the whole Bally Sports shenanigans. And the Ducks have decided to go separate. They're going to be on KCOP regional games, I would assume. That'd be all the West Coast Rocky Mountain games will be on free TV. And then Victory Sports, you'll be able to access it there, I guess, via streaming. I'm not big on streaming. John Riley does stream. He subscribes to Everything Plus.
But not Victory. I've never even heard of that one.
Well, that story just broke yesterday. So Ducks fans will get a chance here to see their games on free TV, which will be cool. And then obviously Victory Plus. And I'll let you figure out how that works, and you can explain it to me as I come over to have a beer watching some hockey.
Well, I remember it was Fox Sports San Diego that would oftentimes have Clippers games and then Ducks games.
And then it'd be in Bally Sports.
Yeah, then it went to Bally. Exactly. So this is the same kind of vibe. So yeah, it'd be great to be able to catch those games on TV.
On we go. Next in. Thanks, Callum, for being with us.
All right, let's go to Greg. Greg says, Lee, what would your Mount Rushmore be for Chargers quarterbacks? Great show, and bum, there's no Dixieline lumber up here in Seattle. We miss you up here, by the way.
Greg, I would have to say the Mount Rushmore Charger quarterbacks has to start with Fouts, and then it has to contain Phillip Rivers. And then I would tend to think back in the day, and I remember the old AFL Chargers, the John Hadel, Jack Kemp Chargers, although Kemp had more success, I guess, in Buffalo with the AFL Bills. I would say those would be the Mount Rushmore guys. I don't know whether we put our Super Bowl quarterback.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah, what did led him to the Super Bowl? I don't know. I don't know if we do that.
One of the four.
Well, then, but then you got Justin Herbert, who's right there on the brink of greatness, though it may be too early to put him up on Mount Rushmore. But yeah, I would say Stan Humphries has to be part of that equation.
Yeah, I think you hit all the big names, but Justin Herbert is kind of in the on deck circle. He might displace one of them. But think about like the opposite of a Mount Rushmore and all the horrible quarterbacks that we've had here in San Diego. Mark Vlasic, and Craig Wheelahan, and you probably can name a bunch of them off the top of your head.
There were a whole pile of them back in the day when they didn't really have quarterbacks, the Sean Salisburys of the world and those guys. But let's not be negative here. The question was a real legitimate positive about great quarterbacks for the San Diego Chargers.
No Ryan Leaf? You got to put Leaf up there. He's on the backside of the mountain.
To quote Deion Sanders, why are you being negative, man?
Right, there you go.
Okay,
you're right. That's a good call.
Next one.
All right, just a quick year from XS Revolution. Bonjour du Canada.
Oh, Canada. Oh, the Hockey Hotline fans, they're going crazy. Camps are opening in 2 weeks. Hockey fans are just beside themselves.
It's going to be awesome,
yes.
Man. The season getting started. Okay, here's a long one here from David. He says, hey, Hacksaw, nice to see your show. I'm a longtime fan from Rancho Bernardo. As the Paralympic Games begin, what do you think of a show or segment weekly or daily with updates in the community of athletes in the disabled community? It can include information about local programs, including adaptive sports programs, the Miracle Leagues, Aces for Autism, info on adaptive sporting equipment development, etc. Have a great 3-day weekend coming up.
The Paralympics are great. You have to access Peacock to watch the Olympics. I watched the opening ceremonies. That was really cool in the stadium as they brought all the athletes, some of them obviously wheelchair bound, in with the American flags. I mean, it's just really neat. Now, it doesn't get, obviously, the coverage that the normal Olympics got in Paris just, a couple weeks ago, but there's a time and place to cover it. It's really hard to cover it. I've tried to search out access, but we don't know the athletes. They're not household names. It's not the Michael Phelpses of the world. So it's just really hard to cover it, but they have their place and they do have their recognition.
It's interesting for a couple of angles here, because you do a great job, Hacksaw's Headlines, covering the world of sports, which is a ton of information. And yeah, Paralympics might not be at the top of the list, but the beauty of podcasting is such that you could, right here, David laid out a whole program here on how to do the Paralympic podcast. The beauty of podcasting is that you can identify a niche audience, a target small audience, and provide content that they're hungry for. So maybe David should start a podcast talking about that, because he probably knows a lot of the names and faces, and there would be a huge, loyal, narrow, but loyal audience for that.
I concur. Somebody wrote me a week ago and said, how come you guys haven't done anything about the Little League World Series? Well, there's only so much time in the day for me to cover certain things. And he was barking at me, how come you didn't do anything on TV on your sportscast on KUSI? At which point my response was, who am I going to bump off from a content standpoint? I mean, Little League World Series is special. What ESPN has done with the events and all the games broadcast, that's really kind of special. Social media has done a great thing, but there's only so many hours in the day that one person can do to cover. And what do you delete if you're going to do something special? That's a hard call.
It really is. And now, when you were doing the TV news, I mean, how long was your segment? Like 7 minutes?
7 minutes, but that usually covers 4 topics over 7 minutes, because you're doing video and you're doing boards. And it's really hard to find the slot. My response is just go enjoy what ESPN's coverage looks like and what they do on ESPN1, ESPN2, and just enjoy that.
Exactly.
Next topic.
Okay, here, let's go to Michael. He says, Deion needs Carlton Fisk to tell him how to act, as he did when they both played baseball. Deion's act wore thin as a player in the NFL and will now as a coach.
Well, they're really bitter in Colorado. Now, the CU alums and the fans, they like what they're seeing. That's great. But that 3-0 start became a 1-8 finish. And then there was another truckload of players who were forced out of that program in the transfer portal. And now there's this next wave of new guys that are coming in. And, Colorado opens their season tonight, and I'm going to watch it because I want to see how different they are with Shedeur Sanders, who I think is a fine college quarterback. But they're playing North Dakota State. That's 1AA. As good as North Dakota State is, Colorado will mop up the floor with them. Just like San Diego State will probably do the same against Texas A&M Commerce. But at the end of the day, this whole season will spin on what kind of success they have going to the Big 12. And will they be better, or will defensive coordinators figure out everything that Deion and that staff is going to run, and they'll defend them and they'll take them apart again. And then coaches will run up scores, because a lot of coaches, Pac-12 and in the Big 12, are still irritated at what Deion did to all those kids that he forced into the transfer portal and he ran off. Will the story get old and stale? If they sit there and go 3-9 this season, yeah, he's going to have some problems keeping his job. And there's just, to me, from a media perspective, there's no reason for him to pick this fight with the media. Answer the questions, let the media do their job, and then cover the games and the product on the field.
Well, the transfer portal is going bonkers with the Aztecs too, but It's maybe the players are choosing to leave. It's just a weird dynamic. I'm rooting for Coach Prime. I want him to be successful, not just because he's a Pac-12 coach going to a new conference, but I'd like him. And even with a little bit of the bravado, sometimes he needs to turn it down a notch, but overall, like it. The Carlton Fisk angle is interesting, as I'm doing math in my head. Deion played baseball for the Braves and the Yankees in the early 90s. Or mid 90s, and was Carlton Fisk still playing for the White Sox then?
No, at that point. But I think he's talking about how to handle celebrity status and the accomplishments you think you're going to have or want to have, etc.
Okay, well, the other catcher I associate with Deion is Tim McCarver.
Sure.
And he got the ice dumped on him. That's still classic Deion
And that
Sanders.
Relationship didn't work out very well, but each had their own style.
They did. Okay, here, let's go here to Floyd. And he says, college football playoffs are too small. FCS has 23 teams. Why can't CFP do 16? Also, all FBS conference championships need to be represented and 7 at-large berths.
Well, they're not going to let all the smaller conferences in. They'll take the best team, but the best team will be probably the only team. It'll be the highest ranked champion from Mountain West, Mid-American, the American Athletic Conference, things like that. We're just not going to take everybody, and put them in, because then you're going to have 63-7 blowouts, and I don't think that's good for the college football playoffs. Now, the flip side, does there have to be a better balance? I mean, we're going to take 6 SEC teams and maybe 1 extra from the Big 12 and the Big 10. Is that how we're going to get the rest of those at-large teams in? Is that going to really be good for college football?
Well, even in that national championship, what was it? It was the TCU and they got blown out. It was like a 63-7.
Yes.
That was against Georgia, wasn't it? By the way, I how do I say this? The FBS versus FCS, I always kind of confuse those in my head because I think of Division One and Division One AA and how those are different, but those are the new names for each of those, right?
Mhm.
And so so which is the one that's, let's say, for the SEC? Is that FBS or FCS? Do you get? I mean, it's
It's too
mind-boggling
complicated
confusing.
for me.
It is, and like USD here in San Diego I always think one AA, but it's one of those F ones.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on. Let's go to John. As much as I'd rather be concentrating on the games in NCAA football, the conference merry-go-round is stealing attention from the games. The ACU will start disintegrating like the Pac-12 after this season. The Big 12 did some damage control, but their marquee schools have already left. Nebraska, Missouri, Texas A&M, Texas, Oklahoma. Kansas is looking at elsewhere now. The Big 12 will follow the AC. I assume he means AC.
Yeah.
Is it
Atlantic
AAC or the ACC?
ACC.
The ACC and Pac-12 towards relegation, leaving the SEC and Big Ten as the Power Two.
It's chaos. I do think it'll probably change. There's a sidebar story we haven't talked about. The Big 12 met last week in Dallas with UConn. They want UConn basketball, but they have to take everybody else. UConn's football program is face first down on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody follows it. Nobody cares. And they want UConn Husky football to be part of the Big 12? You're kidding me.
Yeah, well,
it's so absurd.
There's a lot of perverse incentives going on right now because everyone's chasing the money, and sometimes it just doesn't make sense.
So there probably will be more changes. There will be more schools that will defect and go other places, but we may also have somebody waking up some morning at the end of next football season and saying, Cal and Stanford, Atlantic Coast Conference, this doesn't make any sense. And somebody's going to vacate where they went and go back. So there'll be more changes coming. But there aren't very many other schools out there to go steal and go get.
Well, Cal and Stanford, they're not juggernauts of programs in the first place.
Right.
They're going to end up going these cross-country trips, and they're going to have like an O for season. I mean, it could be really ugly for those two guys.
And I project that this UCLA to the Big Ten is not going to work out. And Cal Stanford in the Atlantic Coast Conference might not work out. And those guys may come back and there'll be a rebirth or a different structure to the Pac-12 conference. It's not going to happen immediately, but I think that's going to happen.
The Swami says, Hacksaw. All right, here we go. Let's go to Philip. And he says, wouldn't want to go to Russia where they lock people up for the non-crime of just having a little herb on them?
Well, it's really weird because I asked this question about a year ago to an NHL assistant general manager. I said, why would these guys go there? It's a payday. Most of these guys that are going there are at the end of their career. But I said, it's a lifestyle thing. He said, but the athletes there are treated like royalty. Mm-hmm. As long as you don't do something stupid like taking drugs on a plane and landing in Moscow, or you don't do a political comment on social media. I feel bad because I like Chase Dillio. He's a hardworking, honest guy. I got to know him when he was in Winnipeg with the Winnipeg Jets. And now I'm bothered because the Ducks have not put a good product on the ice here in San Diego. And they've kind of screwed up what was a really well-run franchise. They used to draw 11 and 12,000 to home games at the sports arena. And now those crowds are down to 4,500 and 5,000. And the product hasn't been very good. They've been in the playoffs in a couple of years. I mean, I don't know what they're going to put on the ice here, especially if the Ducks are taking all those draft picks and they're still going to go to Anaheim rather than here. I have a feel that the NHL team has a responsibility to the local community to put a better product on the ice than we've seen the Ducks give the Gulls the last couple of years.
Yeah, you bring up a number of points there. The first thing I thought of was Winston Shepard when he played for the Aztecs, and then he was a professional in Ukraine when Russia invaded. And I remember he had to hightail it out of there, and he was okay. But sports in the middle of a war sounds really tricky. The other comment the question I wanted to ask you is, you're talking about the Ducks, you're talking about Pechanga Arena. We haven't heard any real news on the new sports arena that they're planning on putting down there. Have you heard anything new?
I have not heard when the shovel of dirt's supposed to be turned and what's going to happen to the tenants, the goals, most notably at that point in time. The San Diego Sockers are leaving. They're going to their new private small arena that'll be up in Oceanside. Mm-hmm. So, but I don't think the thing is stalled. Maybe it's been tangled in red tape about how Kroenke is building it, but I thought there had been a solution to the new sports arena, because that sports arena is going to be renovation of a facility, but it's also going to be housing, business, and entertainment stuff wrapped around on that parcel of land. Have not heard much about it lately, but I still think it's going forward.
Yeah. Well, I could say this, our sponsor, Dixieline, they're there right next to the sports arena.
Exactly.
And I think the city owns their land. So there's a lot of question marks about the leases and how that's going to be going. The timeline seems to keep getting delayed.
On we go. Next question.
Okay, let's get some social media folks here involved. We have a lot of good comments and questions here. We got to get this one in right here. This is from Marco Antonio. He says, I'm from Tijuana. I love the Dodgers and 49ers, but man, this guy, Lee Hacksaw, to me, it's a legend. As you can see here in Tijuana, in fact, in Rosarito, I couldn't get the signal from San Francisco or Los Angeles. So when I was young, I listened to this gentleman on Mighty 690. Great show.
77,000 watts from Baja to the Canadian Rockies, and it came out of the tower on Rosarito Beach. Just most unique situation I think I've ever been involved in. I had no knowledge when I came here of how Mexican radio worked. You know, I've told the story to John a couple times that when I was initially hired to come here to be the voice of the Chargers, and a vice president called me from 690 and introduced himself to me. I got a phone call out of the blue sky, sitting at my desk in Phoenix. I worked at KTAR. I thought I was going to be there forever, doing Arizona State and doing a sports talk show. And this gentleman called me and said, I represent Noble Broadcast Group. We have the license for Extra 690. Our game plan is we've just secured the rights to the Chargers. We want you to be the voice of the Chargers because we know what you've done with the Sun Devils, and we know what you've done with sports talk radio, and we want you to come here. And then I asked him, well, explain to me what XTRA is, And he said, we're a Mexican licensed station. I said, well, I'm flattered that you consider me to be the voice of the Chargers and do sports talk radio because I've done very well with that here, but I don't speak Spanish. And I thought he wanted me to come do play-by-play in Spanish and do sports talk radio. I didn't know. I'd been to San Diego once in my life, or actually twice in my life. Actually, we came over and played in the Holiday Bowl. Arizona State played Arkansas in the Holiday Bowl, and we had a great time. So I had no knowledge whatsoever what he was making reference to. And then they explained to me how the licensing worked, the programming worked, and their plans were we're going to build studios in San Diego and it would be an English-speaking station on a Mexican license. So that's my story of how I got here, and I had no knowledge how Mexican radio's relationship with U.S. broadcasting worked, but now I know.
Well, it's just the way radio is structured in America is all the stations on the West start with a K.
Right.
And they start with a W on the East.
Right.
And then suddenly they're starting with an X, here because of the Mexican stations. But remember, it was always like around midnight, they'd play the Mexican national anthem. But then now I'm sure all those Mexican stations, if they're doing sports radio, which I know many of them aren't anymore, but if they are, they're probably just 24/7 syndicated ESPN stuff.
Some, and the whole landscape, the advertising landscape has changed. It's much harder now to do cross-border broadcasting. There's very few stations that are on this side that are owned or licensed to Americans who are you rent the license. You don't own the station. It's complicated.
You share crazy stories at Extra about the engineers and how they'd have to connect to the signal in Mexico, and sometimes things went weird.
Exactly. We'll do that another time.
Okay.
But Tijuana, great to have you on board. Tell all your friends south of the border to join us on this podcast, and also check my website.
Okay, let's get some Charger fan comment from the 2-cent Peanut Gallery. He says, you get a thumbs down for regurgitating that 8-year-old joke from South Park about the Charger fans in LA. When you all going to get tired of regurgitating that same cowardly narrative? It is cowardice to hate on a team just because you think they don't have many fans. We're growing, baby. Don't you remember the year after the Rams won the Super Bowl week 17? 80% Chargers in SoFi. Yet you all haven't updated your fear of being outnumbered. Real ones from LA like myself stay loyal to the only team in the NFL that has always stayed loyal to the SoCal soil.
You look good in powder blue. Don't agree with you, but that's okay. You look good wearing the lightning bolt. At the end of the day, I still think LA is a Rams town until the Chargers become a playoff team, and Justin Herbert has not won a playoff game yet. I still think it's going to be a Rams town. Can the Bolts take control of the market? Yeah, got to win. And, let's also be realistic. There is no bitterness in LA. You got the franchise. There's a lot of bitterness this side of Camp Pendleton that we lost the franchise and a greedy owner, turned his back on 55 years of loyalty. I don't think that will ever change. We do cover them. I cover them. I probably cover more of the Chargers than any other member of the media. The newspaper here, the Union Tribune, uses an LA writer, and they cut and paste their stories. I don't know what kind of readership the Chargers have. The TV stations they'll go up and they'll shoot some games, and maybe they'll run some highlights, but they don't cover it as much as I cover it. And I think I cover the NFL and the Chargers more than the Union Tribune does. And I know I cover it more than anybody on Sports Talk Radio. And if I was doing Sports Talk Radio like this podcast, we'd be doing Chargers and Rams stuff on an almost even Steven basis. And then we'd cover the Raiders and the Denver Broncos and all the other NFL stars. I do it differently than anybody else in the working media. But there is people to hear just this side of Camp Pendleton, from Oceanside down, cannot forgive them. Fans do watch the games. Probably about half of what used to watch it when it was the San Diego Chargers. They used to have TV ratings, I want to say, of 30 shares. I think they probably have 15 shares now on the CBS affiliate down here. I don't know, of the 15 share that's watching, I don't know if they're watching because they still love the team, or they're watching because they hate the team and want to see them lose, or they just watch because it's the NFL game that's on in town. So that's the media perspective. I'll let the fan, John Riley from left field, give you his opinion.
Well, the fans, a lot of them are still rightfully PO'd, the San Diego fans. Yeah, we have some friends that live up in LA. They're actually more like Huntington Beach, actually, but they're season ticket holders for at SoFi, and they're excited about the Chargers. But that seems to be the exception to the rule. But I can sense in San Diego that some of the fans are sort of getting over it. Now they just want to follow the NFL, and it's another Southern California team. But dude, you cover not just the Chargers, you cover everything. You are the hardest working man in sports journalism, and you think about what you do when you're writing your best 15, your one man's opinion, all the other things that you post on the website, the content on Twitter, the podcast, all the video clips and everything else that we're doing. It's like a deluge of hacksaw sports content that nobody does anywhere in Southern California.
Well, thank you for the compliment. I work hard at it. I'm kind of addicted to it. That's why I have the website. If you've never checked the website, you're really missing something. So it's there every morning. It's absolutely free. John, I don't know anything in the world that's freaking free right now.
Really?
But it's free. So check the website. And of course, we love doing the podcast, and we just trying to cover the waterfront. That's who I am. That's how I act. That's what I'm addicted to. That's a sales pitch. So you can be upset at San Diego fan for being pissed off. They have a right to be pissed off, but we do follow it down here. I do follow it. I can't wait for the start of the NFL season.
Oh, it's going to be great. And by the way, the Charger followers on Instagram are unbelievable. And whenever we post a video there, they all go crazy. So let's get one more comment here. Angels. Let's talk a little LA Angels. This is from Childish Cavillo. And he says, things are looking good after the owner made some costly mistakes. The young players are looking good, and we have some good prospects to look forward to. Also, most of the best prospects are in Double-A, which is good. Everyone needs to chill. Ohtani's on the Dodgers. Nobody can change that. Rendon is probably going to get dropped in the offseason.
Well, it's been a tough finish to the season. They really had a lousy last month of August. We saw flashes. We saw Zito, Ohapi, Chanel, to a degree, Moniak, and even Joe Adell. They play well in spurts, but they just don't have enough guys to play 162 games. And now what's happened in August, I mean, they've been miserable. I mean, what's their record? 54-79 right now. I mean, they're probably going to close to 100 losses. The young players, their farm system's not highly rated. They need volumes of young players. They need not to make mistakes in free agency. The pitching staff is wafer thin. It's not a good look. And it's sad on Artie Moreno's watch, this thing has just become a disaster. And once you dig a hole, it's tough to climb out of this hole. And there's no guarantee that free agency, because they've missed on 50% of the free agent acquisitions, that free agency is the solution. And sadly for Mike Trout, he's had all these years of just being hurt, and he can't stay on the field. And he's the last cornerstone of credibility they have from what was a good franchise once upon a time. So long road back. I wish he'd sell it. I wish he had better baseball people making the decision, but he's elected to keep it, and he's elected to keep the general manager there continue to operate it and try to build it through the farm system. But boy, that takes forever. And I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, you can be optimistic and you can be hopeful, and it could be a great baseball market. It could be a great hockey market. It could be a great market. Orange County unto itself is a market unto itself, and it should have winners. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a winner in baseball and doesn't have a winner in the NHL right now either. John?
Think about how long it's taken the Padres to kind of come back from the depths. I mean, was it about 15 years ago was when they were owned by the owner that had them on layaway.
Yeah.
Right. They had no resources, and now they're filling the stadium up. The Angels are still a mystery to me, but here's just kind of an odd question. Which version of the Angels do you hold closest in your heart? Is it the California Angels, the Anaheim Angels, or the Anaheim Angels of Los Angeles?
It's the Darren Erstad, Tim Salmon, Mark Langston Angels.
Okay.
The Angels that went to the World Series. It's the David Ecksteins of the world. That's the Angel franchise that I identify with. And I guess they were the California Angels at that point in time. I just call them the Angels. I don't care what the designation is, California, Anaheim, or Los Angeles Angels. I remember that group, how great that group was. And that's the last vestige of quality baseball those poor people in Orange County had to root for.
From that era, I remember the Thundersticks.
Yes.
And they were just overwhelming. But to me, it's California Angels. It's Bobby Grich, back in that era.
Well, that's the Autry Angels, but boy, that's a lot of fastballs ago.
Yeah, that's in the 70s. And then, even Reggie Jackson was there for a little while and made that appearance in that movie when he was going to shoot Queen Elizabeth. So, the California Angels to me was cool because they wanted to represent the whole state. Kind of like the Golden State Warriors. And I thought that was neat. When they went to Anaheim, that's when they became Disney-ified, if I recall. And then now they're the Artie Moreno LA Angels. I just like the vibes of Nolan Ryan, wearing that California Angels hat with the halo above
Ryan
the A.
and Tanana.
And Tanana, yeah.
And I mean, that was a good chunk of time in a different, very far back era. And then obviously the Autry Angels and the Disney Angels, and getting to the World Series was electric. And that's the more modern day Angels, but this unfortunately is terrible. The prime example is all you need to do if you're in Orange County is just look down I-5 and look at what Petco Park has become and look at what you can do. And this is a much smaller market than what I think is a much bigger market in the OC.
Oh yeah.
Look at what has happened here. And that's a commitment to ownership. That's with leadership. That's with scouting. That's with drafting. That's with the right free agents. And unfortunately, we haven't seen much of that in Orange County after the first couple of years when Artie Moreno inherited it and they won, and then it's gone off track. But unfortunately, when you're down, it takes forever to get it back.
I don't think they're coming back if Artie Moreno remains the owner. And Angel fan everywhere, sell the team, Artie. That's what they all want to do. They want to hit the reset button.
Hey, listen, we hope you have enjoyed our Thursday podcast.